Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this underlying expectation of precision, right?
Right, yeah, like engineering.
Exactly. Like you fall, you break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line on the black background, and the doctor just points at it and says, right there, that's the fracture.
It's binary. I
Yeah.
mean, it's visible. You either have the fracture or you don't.
Yeah.
And the path to fixing it is completely standardized.
It is, and there is something deeply comforting about that. We like our problems to be visible.
Definitely.
It makes a chaotic world feel manageable. But then, and this is where it gets tricky, you step into the world of personal transformation.
Oh, yeah. That's a whole different ball game.
Right. You decide you want to change your habits, or you want to write a book, or maybe you just want to stop feeling so, chronically burnt out by 3:00 p.m. every day.
Yeah, the afternoon slump.
Exactly. You step into that arena, and suddenly that diagnostic x-ray machine it's completely broken.
We are looking at a landscape that is just incredibly murky at that point.
Totally. You try to build a new routine, you fail, and instead of a clean x-ray showing you exactly where the structural fracture is, you are just left staring at this blurry mess of self-doubt.
It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters. And because we don't have that clear imaging for our own behavior, we default to, well, the most painful interpretation.
Which is?
Most of the time, when we fail at a personal goal, say, sticking to a fitness routine or a creative project, we diagnose it as a moral failing.
Oh, 100%.
We say, I just lack willpower.
Yeah.
Or I'm fundamentally lazy, or, I'm just not disciplined enough.
We internalize the failure. And I mean, that is exactly why we are embarking on this deep dive today.
It really is.
Because what if I told you, and I'm talking directly to you listening right now, what if I told you that there actually is an x-ray machine for your behavior?
A literal mathematical blueprint.
Yes, a blueprint that diagnoses the exact structural breakdown in your life. Today, we are opening up a highly structured life architecture manual. It's titled The Architect of Your Own Meaning.
And we're getting specific today.
Very specific. We are going to explicitly focus on chapters C and D of this text, looking at a framework it calls META-MATICS.
Right. And what makes this source material so compelling is that we're completely bypassing the vague, motivational self-help advice you usually hear.
Thank goodness for that.
Right. There are no platitudes here about just believing in yourself. Instead, we are stepping into precise pseudo-algebraic concept mapping.
It sounds intense, but it's amazing.
It literally treats your daily life, your habits, and your energy like an architectural blueprint.
But I'm going to be honest right out of the gate here. When I first looked at Chapter C, which covers what the text calls the first mapping, I was skeptical.
That's a pretty normal reaction, honestly.
I mean, the premise is that before you try to change anything, you have to map your current reality using the pseudo-algebraic system. And my immediate thought was, treating my emotional burnout with algebra sounds a bit cold.
It does sound cold.
Right. How does reducing my messy human life to an equation actually help when I'm just too exhausted to get out of bed?
It's a completely fair reaction. We aren't used to applying rigid logic to our emotions or our willpower. But that coldness, that detachment, that is exactly the mechanism that provides relief.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Well, when you use the logic of algebra to map your behavior, you are forced to step outside of your feelings of guilt.
Oh, I see.
You achieve what psychologists call cognitive distancing. You stop being a bad person who failed, and you become like a system administrator observing a faulty script.
That's a huge shift.
It is, and the text uses a specific notation for this mapping. It's written as A over B, integrated with C over D.
Right, I remember seeing that. It literally looks like two fractions connected by a plus sign with a circle around it. Let's break down those variables, because once I understood what these letters meant, it completely reframed how I view my own energy.
Let's do it.
So, the text calls the numerators, the A and the C, the iterators.
Yes. Think of the iterators as the internal fuel. It is the content you bring to the table in any given situation.
Like the active ingredient.
Exactly, the active living element. An iterator could be your raw physical energy, your commitment to a goal, your curiosity, maybe your inherent skill level. It is the raw material that you are pouring into your life.
And then we have the denominators, the B and the D. These are what the text calls the delineators.
Right.
If the iterator is the fuel, the delineator is the context. It's the environment or the constraint that shapes that fuel.
Perfect way to put it.
A delineator might be your daily structure, your recovery capacity, the available support network you have, or even like the literal physical room you are sitting in.
And the relationship between those two is where the magic happens.
Yeah.
In normal math, that slash line between A and B means division. But in META-MATICS, that line means filtered by or expressed through.
Okay, so A filtered by B.
Right. So your iterator is filtered by your delineator.
Uh-huh.
And then connecting these two pairings is an integration symbol. It shows that these variables don't exist in a vacuum.
They synthesize together to create your current reality. Okay, let's unpack this and apply it to a real scenario.
Let's do it.
Because the source provides this highly relatable example of trying to build a sustainable daily practice, like a morning writing habit or a daily workout.
We've all been there.
Right. So the text maps this specific challenge as energy filtered by daily structure, integrated with commitment, filtered by recovery capacity.
And this is where the formula becomes that diagnostic X-ray we were talking about earlier.
Yes.
Let's say someone fails to maintain that daily writing practice. By day 4, they just stop waking up early to do it. What do they usually say to
I
themselves?
didn't have enough energy.
Right. Or, I guess I just wasn't committed enough. They blame the iterators.
But when you map it out on paper, you look at the energy filtered by daily structure part of the equation, and you realize the breakdown usually isn't a lack of internal energy.
Not at all.
You have the energy. The problem is a chaotic daily structure. Your delineator is broken. Think about it like pouring high-octane racing fuel, that's your iterator, your raw energy, into a car engine.
Okay, I like this analogy.
But that engine has massive leaks in the fuel line. The engine is your delineator, your daily structure. It literally does not matter how good the fuel is
Right.
or how much you genuinely desire to drive the car. If the engine leaks, you are going to stall out on the driveway. And the tragedy is you're sitting there in the driver's seat thinking you bought bad fuel.
That analogy perfectly captures the mechanism of failure. You aren't failing because your fuel is bad. You're failing because the container holding the fuel is compromised.
It's such a relief to realize that.
What's fascinating here is, if we look at the second half of that equation, commitment filtered by recovery capacity, we see the exact same psychological trap.
How so?
Well, your commitment might be rock solid. You genuinely, deeply want to write that book. But if your recovery capacity, your sleep, your mental downtime, your physiological rest is practically zero, because you're doom scrolling until 2:00 a.m.
Which we all do.
Right, then your commitment will eventually collapse under the sheer weight of exhaustion.
Yeah.
The delineator fractures, and it takes the iterator down with it.
So for you listening, think about how profoundly this shifts the narrative. This mapping formula actively removes shame.
Completely.
When you fail at a new habit, it is so easy to fall into a spiral of self-loathing. But META-MATICS asks you to just look at the math. It is a structural error in your architecture, not a moral failing in your soul.
It's just a leaky engine.
Exactly. If your energy is constantly scattering, you don't need to watch another motivational video to pump up your iterator, you know? You need to fix the leaks in your daily structure.
And if your commitment is waning, you don't need a pep talk. You need to increase your recovery capacity.
It shifts you from being a victim of your own supposed laziness to being the architect of your own life.
Relief that provides is immense. But, as the text quickly points out, knowing the formula is really just the beginning.
Right, because diagnosing the leaky engine doesn't automatically fix the car.
Exactly. We are complex human beings, and we have to interact with these variables.
Which brings us to what Chapter C calls the representation decision. And I have to say, this is where the framework gets incredibly nuanced.
It really does.
It is one thing to know that your energy is filtered by your daily structure. It is entirely another thing to decide how you are going to interface with those variables on a Tuesday morning when your alarm goes off.
Right. And the text introduces 3 specific modes of representation for this: person, persona, and principle.
And it offers a pretty stark warning here, doesn't it?
It does. It says if you use the wrong mode for the wrong variable, you're guaranteed to end up in energetic debt. Burnout is inevitable.
Let's deeply explore these 3 modes because mismanaging them seems to be the root cause of modern burnout. First, we have the person mode.
Yes. The person mode is your direct, conscious agency.
Wow.
It is the raw, authentic self,
The real you.
the real you. You use person mode for high attention, identity-level decisions and interactions.
So person mode is where genuine, unfiltered presence is required. It's the mode that cannot be delegated to anyone else.
Right.
Like if you are defining your core life values or having a deeply vulnerable conversation with your spouse, or managing your actual physical bodily energy in the moment that requires the person.
Yeah.
It requires you.
Exactly. But the cost of operating in person mode is that it requires immense cognitive, emotional, and spiritual investment.
It's heavy lifting.
It's incredibly heavy. You cannot walk around in raw, vulnerable person mode 24 hours a day. Your nervous system simply cannot handle that level of continuous, unfiltered exposure to the world.
Which brings us to the second mode, the persona. The text describes the persona as a strategic, role-based representation.
Yes, it requires a medium level of investment. You use this for context-specific performance where efficiency matters more than raw vulnerability.
Think of the persona as like putting on a specific uniform. It is professional mode when you are leading a difficult project meeting.
Or customer service mode when you're dealing with a difficult client.
Or even coach mode when you are helping a friend through a crisis. It requires conscious switching.
You are still you, but you are a curated, bounded version of you designed to execute a specific task in a specific environment.
Okay, wait, I need to push back on this a little bit.
Sure.
Is persona just an academic way of saying we should fake it? Aren't we constantly told by modern psychology and corporate culture that we are supposed to be our authentic selves all the time?
The whole bring your whole self to work thing.
Exactly. Bring your whole self to work. If I'm using a persona, aren't I just being inauthentic?
This raises an important question, and the text addresses this tension beautifully. We have to separate authenticity from boundarylessness.
Okay.
Persona is not deception. It is a strategic boundary. Think about the reality of the world. You do not want to bring your entire raw, vulnerable, unfiltered person to a hostile corporate boardroom.
Or to a chaotic family gathering.
Right. It's not psychologically safe, and frankly, it's highly inefficient.
Because if you bring your raw person mode to a hostile meeting, every criticism feels like a fundamental attack on your soul.
Exactly. The persona protects the person. It allows you to navigate complex social, professional, and environmental architectures without bleeding emotional energy everywhere.
That makes total sense.
Let's say you are a nurse working a grueling 12-hour shift. If you use your raw person mode, with every single patient absorbing all their pain, all their fear, directly into your authentic core, you will burn out in a week.
You'd suffer from profound compassion fatigue.
Yes, but if you use your clinical care persona, you can deliver incredibly effective, deeply compassionate care while maintaining a protective boundary around your core self. It is a tool of self-preservation.
The persona protects the person. That completely shifts the paradigm from I'm being fake to I am deploying a boundary.
Precisely.
But even the persona requires energy. It takes effort to maintain that uniform, and that segues perfectly into the third mode, which the text positions as the ultimate protector of your energy, the principle.
The principle is a system-operated representation. It requires very low ongoing attention, but it requires upfront design.
Okay, so it's a system.
Right. Principles are your automated frameworks.
So this is your calendar blocking. This is your automated savings transfer at the bank.
Yes.
This is setting your coffee maker to brew automatically at 5:50 a.m. or a rule that says no screens in the bedroom.
You do the heavy cognitive work once to design the principle, and then the principle runs the behavior for you. It offloads the decision-making burden entirely.
Let's bring these three modes back to our balance notation from earlier. The text shows what a healthy, sustainable map looks like when you apply these modes correctly.
Right, it maps it out.
It maps it as energy operated by the person, filtered by daily structure, operated by a principle, integrated with commitment, operated by the person, filtered by recovery capacity, operated by a principle.
Let's visualize this. So energy and commitment, the iterators, the internal fuel, are assigned to the person mode.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
You are personally, authentically showing up to feel your energy and to connect with your deep internal commitment to your goal.
That requires your actual presence. You can't automate feeling committed.
Right. But look at the delineator's daily structure and recovery capacity. Those are assigned to the principle mode.
You are not personally waking up every morning and exhausting your person mode, trying to figure out what time you should work out.
Or when you should go to sleep, or what you should eat.
Right.
You let the system, the principle, govern that context.
Exactly.
What happens when people get this wrong? Because the text spends a lot of time warning about the imbalanced pattern.
Oh, the imbalanced pattern is the default state for most highly driven people. Imagine trying to use the person mode for all four variables.
Oh boy.
You wake up and you use sheer authentic willpower to generate energy. Then you use sheer willpower to design your daily structure on the fly, deciding what to do minute by minute.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. Then you use willpower to force your commitment when things get hard. And finally, you use willpower to try and force yourself to recover and sleep.
You are manually relying on your willpower for every single aspect of your existence. You're trying to be the engine, the steering wheel, the map, and the fuel all at once.
And the text warns that if you do this, you will reach total exhaustion incredibly fast.
This is why highly motivated people burn out so spectacularly. They are using the person mode for variables that desperately need to be handed over to a principal.
Right. The text actually ties this to a phenomenon called the inversion kick.
The inversion kick, what's that?
Well, if you are constantly in iterator first mode, always driving, always using the person to push content out into the world, you will inevitably collapse unless you invert your approach and let the delineators, the principles, shape you for a while.
It's a verified balance check. You have to alternate between being the active agent and letting the system be the active agent. So, to you listening, take a hard look at the areas of your life where you feel the most friction or exhaustion right now. Are you trying to use person mode for a variable that should be a principle?
Are you relying on daily motivation when you should be relying on a calendar alert and a pre-packed gym bag?
It's a profound diagnostic question. And once you have mapped those variables and you've made the representation decision, ensuring that you aren't trapped in that imbalanced willpower trap, you are finally ready to initiate the actual transformation.
Which brings us to the operational mechanics.
Yes, the text moves from diagnosis to operation. We are looking at steps 1 through 3 of what the text calls the 11-step operational flow.
And the text makes it abundantly clear that these first 3 steps are foundational setup phases. They have to happen before any physical action takes place.
Skipping these foundational steps is exactly why most people fail to create lasting change.
Think about New Year's resolutions. People love to jump straight to action, straight to hitting the gym on January 1st, without defining the conceptual architecture first.
And because the foundation isn't there, the habit collapses by February.
Exactly.
So let's look at step 1. Define the event atom. The text calls this the irreducible starting point. And here's the absolute key rule that stood out to me. The event atom must be a clear present tense identity claim. It cannot be a vague goal.
The source material contrasts a weak atom with a strong atom to illustrate this. A weak atom is something like, I want to be healthier, or I'm going to try to write a book.
Yeah, we've all set those.
Right? It's vague, it's pushed into the future, and it lacks structural integrity. It's a wish. A strong event atom is, I am someone building a sustainable daily physical practice, or I am a dedicated writer operating in my creative studio.
I am. Present tense, it's an identity level claim. And the text introduces an acronym here to ensure that your event atom has actual weight.
The 40P.
Right, the 40P. It insists that the event atom must connect to the 40P, which stands for target, truth, totally, title. Let's unpack that, because if you miss one of these 4, the text argues your habit won't stick.
The 40P is a brilliant stress test for your goals. First, target. Do you actually have a specific, measurable aim, or is it just a nebulous desire?
Okay, that makes sense.
Second, truth. Is this goal based on an honest assessment of your current reality? If you say, I'm going to run a marathon next month, but you currently don't run at all, you are failing the truth test.
You're building an architecture on delusion.
Right. Delusion is a terrible foundation. And then the third is totally. Are you fully committed to the process, or are you just interested in the outcome?
Are you willing to embrace the friction, or are you hoping it will just be easy?
Exactly. If you aren't totally in, the first sign of resistance will break you. And finally, title. Are you willing to claim the identity now?
You don't wait until the book is published to call yourself a writer. You claim the title of writer the moment you sit down to draft the first page.
If your event atom passes the 40P test, it has gravity. It acts as the seed from which the entire equation grows. If the seed is genetically weak, if it fails the truth test or the title test, the roots will never take hold in your environment.
Wow. Once you have that gravity established in step 1, you move to step 2. Establish duality.
This step is all about identifying complementary tension in your life.
And the text is very adamant here. Duality is not opposition. It is not a conflict to be won or a problem to be solved.
Right. Our brains naturally want to see things as binary conflicts. Good versus bad, work versus rest, discipline versus freedom. We think we have to choose one and defeat the other.
But the text frames duality as two necessary, opposing forces that must exist together for transformation to occur.
The source example pairs effort with restoration. Effort is the pushing, the training, the extending of your capability. Restoration is the resting, the integrating, the recovering.
So what does this all mean? Let's apply an analogy here to really ground this concept. Think of duality like the tension in a guitar string.
Oh, I love this one.
If you want to make music, you need tension. If the string is entirely loose, which would be all restoration, all rest, zero effort, it makes absolutely no sound. It's useless. But if you tighten that string to the extreme, all effort, all pushing, zero rest, the string eventually snaps.
Exactly.
The music isn't found in the effort alone, and it isn't found in the rest alone. The music is created by the tension itself. The relationship between the two forces is what generates power.
That analogy perfectly illustrates step 3. Cultivate synergy. Synergy is the emergent property that happens when the duality from step 2 integrates correctly.
So when the string is tuned right.
Right. When effort and restoration are held in proper tension, when the guitar string is tuned perfectly, what emerges? The text calls the resulting synergy sustainable momentum.
Sustainable momentum, I love that phrase. It's not that explosive, frantic January 1st energy that leads to burnout.
And it's not lazy apathy either.
No, it is a completely new state of being that only exists because you respected the duality of effort and rest.
And again, if we look at why people fail, it's usually because they ignore step 2. They don't respect the duality.
They just focus 100% on effort, grinding, pushing, hustling, and 0% on restoration.
And because they lack duality, they never achieve the synergy of sustainable momentum. The string just snaps.
It is incredibly profound when you look at it sequentially. We have mapped the blueprint, we have claimed the identity with the 4DP, we have tuned the tension of duality, we know our representation modes.
Right.
But as the text powerfully argues, an idea, even a perfectly mathematically mapped idea without a physical home, is just a fantasy. It's a ghost.
Right.
And this brings us explicitly to Chapter D.
Yes, we are crossing a major threshold in the text here. We are moving from the conceptual architecture of Chapter C into the concrete, physical manifestation of Chapter D, the container and the action.
We are explicitly announcing our arrival in Chapter D, and we are putting the biggest spotlight of this entire deep dive on Step 4. Step 4 is called Space Defined.
The text literally refers to this section as the deepest dive.
It really explores extensively why this step is utterly non-negotiable for anyone serious about change.
Space is so frequently misunderstood in personal development. We tend to think of space as just emptiness, a void where our actions happen to take place.
Like a blank room.
Right. But the text aggressively redefines space as an active container. It is the mold that shapes your transformation.
To unpack that active container idea, if you pour a glass of water directly onto a flat table, it scatters everywhere, makes a mess, and eventually evaporates.
Right, it just spreads.
The water is your energy and your intent. If you pour that exact same water into a cup, it takes the shape of the cup and becomes incredibly useful. You can drink it, you can carry it. Step 4 is about building the cup.
Precisely. And the text breaks down the process of building that cup into 3 distinct dimensions of space that you must consciously define.
Okay, what's the first one?
First is physical space. The where. The mandate here is deciding exactly where the action happens so you don't waste what the text calls decision energy.
The text gives a brilliant example of a daily physical practice, like yoga or stretching. If your event, Adam, is about moving your body daily, you don't just tell yourself, I'll work out somewhere in the house tomorrow.
Right, because what happens?
You wake up and you have to use your person mode to scan the living room, realize the kids' toys are everywhere, look at the bedroom, realize your partner is sleeping, and by the time you've made a decision, your energy is gone.
Decision fatigue.
Exactly. Instead, you define the physical space. You clear a specific 2-by-6-foot corner of the office. The mat is always laid out. The foam roller is always in the corner. That specific footprint is the physical space.
Think about the cognitive offloading happening there. You don't have to wake up and negotiate with your environment. You just step into the container.
Here's where it gets really interesting for you, listening right now. Think about how many times you've decided, I really want to read more books this year. I want to read every night.
Well, classic example.
But you didn't define the physical space. You left the book on a shelf in the living room and you went to bed. Because you didn't place the book on your pillow, because you didn't define the physical space where the reading happens, your intent scatters.
And you end up scrolling on your phone in bed because the phone was already inside your physical space.
Exactly.
It perfectly illustrates how iterators like your genuine desire to read need space to express themselves. And delineators like your physical bedroom environment need space to constrain and shape that desire.
If you don't build the physical container, your willpower has to do the heavy lifting of bridging the gap between your desire and your environment. And willpower is a highly exhaustible resource.
Okay, the second dimension of the container is temporal space, the when. These are protected time blocks.
Notice the critical language there, protected time blocks.
Yes, the text example is setting 6:00 a.m. to 6:45 a.m. exclusively for that physical practice. But the absolute key here is that this time block must be assigned the principal mode we discussed earlier. It is non-negotiable.
It is an automated system.
Right. You don't wake up at 5:45 a.m. and ask your person mode, do I feel like working out today? The temporal space has already been decided by the principal.
It is an act of establishing boundaries with time itself. It's treating an appointment with your event atom with the same gravity you would treat a flight departure.
You don't negotiate with the airport, you just show up.
Exactly. And finally, the third dimension of the container is relational or resource space. The with whom or with what. This involves the actual tools, the technology, and the social support required to hold the container intact.
If we look at the daily practice example, relational space means having a specific training app downloaded and queued up on your phone so you aren't scrolling YouTube at 6:00 a.m. trying to find a workout video.
It means having an accountability partner who expects a text from you at 6:50 a.m.
It means having the sleep tracking tech to measure your recovery capacity. These resources, these tools, and these people are the structural walls of the container.
If we step back and connect this to the bigger picture of behavioral psychology, what step 4 is really doing is offloading the cognitive burden from the fragile person to the robust environment.
Yes, that's the core of it.
When you define the physical, temporal, and resource space, you are building an exoskeleton for your habit. It's actually an act of deep self-compassion.
It really is.
You are literally saying to yourself, I know my willpower is finite. I know I will be tired. So I'm going to build a physical and temporal container today so my willpower doesn't have to do all the heavy lifting tomorrow.
That is the fundamental difference between architectural living and willpower living. Willpower living relies on the authentic person mode to force an outcome against a hostile, undefined environment. It's exhausting.
It's really exhausting.
Architectural living relies on the principal mode to construct a supportive environment where the desired outcome becomes the path of least resistance.
The text is blunt. Without step 4, the transformation only exists in your head. It is a brilliant mathematical theory with zero coordinates in physical reality.
But once that container is built, once the mat is down, the time is blocked, and the app is loaded, the energy is trapped in a productive space.
It can't scatter like water on a table. It has nowhere to go but through the process, which moves us brilliantly into the left brain logic of how the action will actually unfold. We're moving into steps 5, 6, and 7, the execution phase.
Now that the container exists in reality, we transition to the actual translation of the plan into embodied action. Step 5 is analytical processing. This is the logic phase.
And the text explicitly notes that this is principle-heavy engineering work. You are figuring out logical sequences, dependencies, and potential failure points.
Right.
But how does someone actually do this? What does analytical processing look like in practice?
The beauty of analytical processing is anticipating the breakdown before it happens in real time. Let's say your event atom is waking up at 6 a.m. Analytical processing means sitting down the night before and looking at the logic of your morning. You ask the system, where is the high probability failure point? The logic phase identifies the snooze button. You know that at 6 a.m. your person mode will be weak and the desire to hit snooze will be high.
So you engineer a solution, you place the alarm clock across the room, you have used logic to alter the physical space, ensuring the temporal space is protected.
Exactly.
You are literally engineering your own compliance. It's so smart because you are solving tomorrow's emotional problem with today's cold logic.
And once that logic is locked in, you move to step 6, physiological mapping. This is the embodiment sequence. You are moving from the abstract left brain plan of step 5 into an actual somatic bodily rehearsal of the action.
The text describes the sequence with incredible sensory detail. You don't just plan the morning on a spreadsheet. You walk through the physical sensations in your mind's eye.
Right, you visualize it.
You visualize waking up. You visualize feeling the heavy, comfortable blanket and the impulse to check your phone. You visualize taking a breath instead. You imagine the feeling of the cold floor on your bare feet. walking to the specific corner of the room, stepping onto the texture of the mat, and anticipating the warmth that will come into your joints 5 minutes into the practice.
It is profound because it recruits the nervous system into the planning phase.
I have a great analogy for this. To me, step 6 is exactly like watching an Olympic downhill skier standing at the starting gate. Have you ever seen them do this on TV?
Oh, where they close their eyes and move their hands.
Yes, they close their eyes and their bodies sway, their hands move, and they visualize every single twist, every turn, every icy patch of the mountain before they ever push off. They are priming their nervous system.
That is a brilliant analogy, and here's why it works.
Hmm.
The skier isn't just picturing crossing the finish line,
Mm-hmm.
which is what most of us do when we set goals.
Mm-hmm.
We just picture the outcome. The skier is actively visualizing the friction. They are rehearsing the burn in their thighs on turn 4. Physiological mapping prepares your nervous system for the reality of the action, including the reality of the resistance.
So it's not a shock.
Right. If you have somatically rehearsed the feeling of the cold floor and the stiffness in your joints, you won't be shocked by it when it actually happens at 6 a.m. You have already mapped it as part of the expected terrain.
You've removed the element of surprise from the friction, which makes step 7 so much more achievable. Step 7 is execute, the moment of embodiment, the moment the arrow finally flies.
And the rules for step 7 are uncompromising in the text. Start small and start now. The text says, tomorrow morning, 6:60 a.m., 1 session.
Not next week when my schedule clears up.
Not, I'll do a massive 2-hour session on Saturday to make up for lost time. 1 small session, tomorrow.
And the second rule for execution is vital. Do not redesign the map mid-flight. When you wake up at 6 a.m. and you are tired, that is not the time to use analytical processing to rethink your routine.
Absolutely not.
That is not the time to renegotiate the terms of the container you build in step 4.
This goes back to honoring the assigned representation modes. If you assigned a principle to your temporal space, if 6:00 a.m. is the automated system, you must let the system rule.
Right.
Do not let your groggy, resistant, emotional person wake up and try to negotiate with the principle. The system is the system.
Don't let the person negotiate with the principal at 6 a.m. That should be framed on a wall. But let's be realistic. Even with all this architecture, resistance will still come.
Of course it will.
You will still feel the magnetic pull of the warm bed. You will still want to quit. And the text offers a really powerful psychological tool for this exact moment, using the recursive self.
The recursive self is the human capacity for meta-awareness. It's the ability to observe your own thoughts. When the resistance hits you in step 7, instead of collapsing into the resistance or shaming yourself for feeling lazy, you simply observe it.
You name it, without judgment.
You say to yourself, here is the expected resistance. Here is the stiffness I literally mapped and predicted yesterday in step 6. By naming the resistance objectively, you detach from it just enough to step onto the mat anyway.
It's the difference between drowning in a rushing river versus standing on the bank of the river, watching the water flow by. You are observing the resistance rather than being consumed by it.
Exactly.
And when you do that, when you detach and observe, you reach step 7. You execute. You take the action.
We have to acknowledge that reaching step 7 is a massive, monumental victory. It is the culmination of immense architectural work. We have successfully moved from the abstract, pseudo-algebraic notation of Chapter C through the foundational setup and into the undeniable physical manifestation in Chapter D. The blueprint has become a building.
It has been an incredible journey through this text. Just to reflect on the sheer scale of what we've decoded today, we started by mapping the current state with the iterators and delineators, learning to diagnose our structural leaks instead of our moral failings. We made the crucial representation decision, deploying person, persona, and principal modes strategically so we don't bleed our energy dry.
We established the foundational steps, defining our event atom with the 40P to ensure it has truth and gravity. We tuned the duality of forces, like a guitar string, to cultivate the synergy of sustainable momentum.
And then we took that massive deep dive into step 4, building the active container by defining our physical, temporal, and relational space.
And finally, we move through the logic of analytical processing, the somatic rehearsal of physiological mapping, and into the final execution.
It is a profound realization that you do not have to rely on fleeting, unreliable motivation ever again. You can rely on architecture. You can rely on structure.
You diagnose the leaks, you protect your authentic self, and you let the systems carry the heavy lifting.
Exactly. I want to remind you, the listener, you are the architect, This framework, META-MATICS, isn't just an academic theory. It is a literal operating system for your life.
Mm.
You now have the mathematical blueprint to stop hoping for change and start architecting it.
By formalizing your process, you remove the heavy burden of shame, and you replace it with the clarity of intentional design.
But as we close this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought. Something to mull over as you look at the containers in your own life. You've mapped your reality, you've defined your space, you've somatically rehearsed the friction, and you've executed step 7. The arrow has flown.
But what happens when you act and the world pushes back in a way your perfectly calculated map didn't predict?
What happens when the environment unexpectedly changes the variables mid-flight? When a delineator suddenly shifts?
How does an architect update their blueprint when the building is already under construction and the ground starts shaking?
It's a question that requires stepping even further into the metamind. We'll leave you to explore that on your own. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the architect of your own meaning. Our mission is always to help you extract the most vital knowledge and apply it directly to your life. So until next time, remember, your diagnostic X-ray machine isn't broken anymore. You have the map. Now go define your space.